In the sprawling tank graveyards of the Eastern Front, among the twisted metal of Tigers and Panthers, one vehicle stands out not for its glamour, but for the sheer number of enemy hulks it left behind. The StuG III wasn't supposed to be a war winner. It was supposed to be cheap artillery support. No turret, no frills, just a gun welded to a tank chassis. But by the time the smoke cleared in 1945, this unglamorous box on tracks had destroyed more enemy armor than any other German vehicle in the entire war. Over 20,000 confirmed kills, more than the legendary Tiger I, more than the mighty Panther, more than all of them combined. How did a vehicle designed as a glorified bunker buster become Germany's most valuable player? The answer reveals everything about what really wins wars, and it isn't always the vehicle with the thickest armor or the biggest gun. Picture this. It's 1936, and German military planners are sitting in a conference room with a problem that haunted them since World War I. During those brutal offensives on the Western Front, German infantry discovered a fatal flaw in their combined arms doctrine. They could break through enemy lines with their stormtroopers, but then what? The artillery couldn't keep up. Those heavy field guns that obliterated trenches during the initial bombardment were too slow, too cumbersome to follow the advancing infantry. Machine gun nests, bunkers, fortified positions. All the things that stopped an advance dead required direct fire from big guns. But by the time the artillery lumbered forward, the momentum was gone. The surprise was lost, and the defenders had regrouped. Colonel Erich von Manstein, who would later become one of Germany's most brilliant field marshals, proposed a solution that seemed almost too simple. What if you mounted a powerful gun directly onto a tank chassis? Not in a rotating turret like a traditional tank, just bolt it straight into an armored box. The infantry wouldn't have to wait for artillery anymore. They'd have their own mobile bunker destroyer rolling right alongside them, ready to blast through whatever the enemy put in their path. Daimler-Benz got the contract. They took the chassis from the Panzer III medium tank, reliable proven hardware that was already in production, and started welding. The gun they chose was the 75mm StuG 37 L24, the same short-barreled howitzer mounted on early Panzer IV tanks. Perfect for demolishing fortifications but not designed to punch through heavy armor. The whole concept was simple. Keep the profile low by ditching the turret, keep costs down by using existing parts, get it to the front lines fast. By 1940, the first Sturmgeschütz III Ausf.A models were rolling off the production line. 30 vehicles, that's it. But those 30 assault guns were about to prove their worth in the most unexpected way. France, 1940. The Blitzkrieg was in full swing. Panzer divisions were slicing through Allied defenses and tucked in with the infantry. Divisions were these new StuG IIIs. Crews loved them immediately. That low silhouette, just under 2 meters tall, made them incredibly hard to spot. Traditional tanks stood 9 feet high or more. Big targets on the battlefield. The StuG III hugged the ground at barely 7 feet. You could hide one behind a hedgerow, a ruined wall, a slight dip in the terrain. And that 75mm gun, it chewed through French bunkers and fortified positions like they were made of cardboard. But here's where things get interesting. The resounding success of France was credited to the fast-moving tank divisions. Heinz Guderian and the Panzer generals convinced high command that tanks were the future. Assault guns? Those were nice support vehicles, sure, but if you wanted to win the war, you needed more tanks. So production of the StuG got capped, limited, resources diverted to building more Panzer IIIs and IVs. It seemed like a reasonable decision at the time. Then Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and everything changed. June 1941. Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. German armies smashed across the Soviet border with overwhelming force. And for a few months it looked like the Blitzkrieg would work again. Soviet armies were encircled, cities were captured. Victory seemed inevitable. Then German tankers started running into something they'd never seen before, the T-34. The T-34 medium tank was a revelation. Sloped armor that deflected German shells. A powerful 76mm gun. Decent speed and mobility, and the Soviets had thousands of them. Suddenly, the Panzer III's little 37mm gun and later 50mm upgrade wasn't enough. German anti-tank crews found their PK-38 guns bouncing shells off T-34 hulls. And then there was the KV-1 heavy tank, a 45-ton monster with armor so thick it laughed at anything Germany could throw at it. The Wehrmacht had a crisis. They needed a bigger gun. The 75mm Pak-40 was in development, a high-velocity anti-tank gun powerful enough to kill T-34s. But there was a problem. It wouldn't fit in a Panzer III turret. The turret ring, the rotating mechanism that allows a tank to aim its gun, was too small. You'd have to completely redesign the Panzer III to mount this gun, and that would take years Germany didn't have. Then someone had an idea. What about the StuG III? It didn't have a turret. It was just a big armored box with a gun mounted inside. Could you fit the Pak-40 in there? Turns out yes. You absolutely could. Spring of 1942. The StuG III AOSFF rolled out with the 75mm StuG IV L43 gun. Later models got the even longer L48 version. And just like that, Germany's cheap infantry support vehicle became a tank destroyer. This gun could punch through 91mm of sloped armor at 500 meters, 82mm at 1,000 meters, 63mm at 2,000 meters. The T-34's hull armor, 47mm. The turret, 60mm. At normal combat ranges, the StuG III could kill a T-34 before the T-34 could effectively return fire, but it wasn't just the gun. It was the whole package. That low profile that made the StuG III perfect for hiding behind hedgerows in France? On the Eastern Front, it was a lifesaver. You could camouflage a StuG III in ways a regular tank could only dream about. Dig it into a defensive position, cover it with branches and netting. From 500 meters away, it disappeared into the landscape. Soviet tankers started calling it the pocket battleship, because when they finally spotted one, it was usually too late. The Panzer III chassis it was built on proved to be bulletproof, figuratively speaking. That Maybach HL 120 TRM V12 engine, pumping out 300 horsepower, was nothing special on paper. But it was reliable, simple to maintain. Parts were everywhere because it was the same engine in thousands of other German vehicles. When Panthers and Tigers were breaking down left and right, often covering fewer than 100 kilometers before needing major repairs, the StuG III just kept running. It had the highest operational availability rating of any German tracked combat vehicle. More StuGs were battle-ready at any given moment than any other German armored vehicle. And the cost. This is where the StuG III's genius really shines. A StuG III Ausf.G cost 82,500 Reichsmarks. A Panzer III Ausf.M, built on the exact same chassis but with a turret, cost 163 Reichsmarks. That's 20,000 Reichsmarks cheaper. A Panzer IV cost around 100,000 Reichsmarks. A Panther cost 117,000 Reichsmarks. A Tiger I, 300,000 Reichsmarks. For the price of one Tiger, you could build more than 3 StuGs, and those 3 StuGs would probably be in the field fighting while that Tiger was in the repair depot with transmission problems. Production numbers tell the story. Between 1940 and April 1945, Germany built over 10,000 StuG IIIs. That made it the most produced German fully tracked armored fighting vehicle of the entire war. Only the SDKFZ 251 half-track beat it in total AFV production. Germany built roughly 6,000 Panzer IVs, about 6,000 Panthers, just 1,347 Tiger Is. The StuG III outnumbered all of them. Why? Because ditching the turret wasn't just cheaper, it was faster. A turret is a complex piece of machinery. You need a turret ring with precision bearings, a traversing mechanism, elevation controls, thick armor that can rotate smoothly. Every turret was a bottleneck in production. The StuG III's casemate design, the fixed armored box, could be welded together on the same production lines that made the Panzer III but faster. When Alket, the main StuG III manufacturer, got bombed by the RAF in November 1943 and production dropped from 255 vehicles in October to just 24 in December, Hitler personally approved mounting the StuG superstructure on Panzer IV chassis to make up the shortfall. That's how critical the StuG had become. Let's talk about what the StuG III actually did on the battlefield. The numbers are staggering. By spring of 1944, StuG III units had destroyed or disabled an estimated 20,000 Soviet tanks. In 1944 alone, some estimates put the StuG's kill count at over 20,000 enemy armored vehicles. The StuG III achieved 18% of all tank kills by German armor in World War II. Think about that. 18% of every single enemy tank destroyed by Germany came from this one vehicle type. More than the Tiger, more than the Panther, more than the famous 88mm anti-aircraft guns pressed into anti-tank service. In Finland, the numbers are even more dramatic. The Finnish army received 59 StuG III and StuG IV assault guns from Germany in 1943 and 1944. Those 59 vehicles destroyed 87 Soviet tanks and lost only 8 StuGs. That's a kill-to-loss ratio of nearly 11-to-1. After the war, Finland kept them in service until the early 1960s. They called them Sturmi, and Finnish tankers loved them so much that captured examples are still displayed with pride in Finnish museums today. German reports from the Eastern Front paint a picture of just how effective the StuG III was. After the Battle of Kursk in August 1943, 11 StuG battalions reported 423 confirmed kills for the loss of just 8 vehicles. One German tank commander wrote in his report, "I would rather have one Sturmgeschütz battalion than an entire Panzer division." Another regimental commander stated, "I prefer 2 Sturmgeschützes to 10 Panzerkampfwagen." That's not propaganda. That's frontline officers begging for more StuGs instead of regular tanks. Interrogations of captured Soviet tank crews revealed something remarkable. Many Soviet units were given strict orders not to engage StuGs directly. Avoid them. Call in artillery, wait for air support, do anything but fight them head-on. Why? Because Soviet tankers quickly learned that if you could see the StuG, it could see you, and it had probably already fired. But the StuG III wasn't invincible. It had serious limitations, and those limitations are key to understanding both its success and its role in the German army. No turret meant no traverse. To aim left or right, you had to turn the entire vehicle. The gun could only rotate about 12 degrees to each side. If an enemy tank flanked you, you were in serious trouble. You had to physically turn the whole StuG to bring the gun to bear, and that took time. In the confusion of close combat, that delay could be fatal. This is why StuGs worked best in defensive positions or ambushes. Dig in, wait for the enemy to come to you, blast them from a prepared position, then retreat to the next offensive line and do it again. The armor was good up front, 80mm on later models, but thin on the sides and rear. Just 30mm in many places. A T-34 hitting you in the flank would punch right through. This made the StuG vulnerable in offensive operations where you had to advance through enemy positions. You needed infantry support constantly. Without infantry watching your flanks and rear, enemy anti-tank teams could sneak up and knock you out with a well-placed shot or a Molotov cocktail. Visibility was terrible. No turret meant no commander's cupola rotating 360 degrees. The crew had limited vision ports and periscopes, all facing forward or to the sides. Blind spots everywhere. Early models didn't even have a machine gun for close defense against infantry. Later versions added a roof-mounted MG-34 or MG-42 behind a shield, but it was exposed. The gunner operating it was vulnerable to enemy fire. A coaxial machine gun mounted next to the main gun only became standard in 1944, and here's something often overlooked. Between December 1943 and May 1944, StuG vehicles fired 315,280 rounds in combat. Only 16.3% of those rounds were targeting enemy armored vehicles. The rest, infantry support, bunkers, fortifications, soft targets. Despite its reputation as a tank destroyer, the StuG III spent most of its time doing exactly what it was originally designed to do, blasting infantry positions. It just happened to be really good at killing tanks too. By late 1943, Germany's situation was desperate. Tank losses on all fronts exceeded production. The Panzer divisions that had swept across Europe were shadows of their former selves. Some divisions had fewer than a dozen operational tanks. High command made a brutal calculation. They couldn't build enough Panthers and Tigers to replace losses. They couldn't even build enough Panzer IVs. But they could build StuGs. So they did. By 1944, more assault guns were rolling off German production lines than tanks. Entire Panzer divisions were being reinforced with StuG battalions. Some formations had more StuGs than actual tanks. Heinz Guderian, when he became Inspector General of Panzer troops in 1943, tried to gain control of StuG production from the artillery branch. He wanted them assigned directly to Panzer divisions. The artillery generals fought him tooth and nail, and Hitler sided with them, but it didn't matter. StuGs were going to Panzer units anyway because there was nothing else to send. In Italy, German crews valued the StuG III for its ability to fight Allied armor, but it struggled with reliability issues. The final drive units, the components transferring power from the transmission to the tracks, were delicate. They broke down frequently in the mountainous Italian terrain. This was the StuG's Achilles heel. It was reliable compared to Tigers and Panthers, sure, but it wasn't indestructible. By April 1945, of the over 11,300 StuGs built, only 1,053 StuG IIIs and 277 StuH 42s remained in German service. The rest had been destroyed, captured, or broken down beyond repair. The StuG III's real genius wasn't any single characteristic. It was the combination. It was cheap enough to build in huge numbers, simple enough to maintain in the field, reliable enough to keep fighting when other vehicles broke down, and deadly enough to kill any Allied or Soviet tank it encountered. It couldn't do everything a regular tank could do. It wasn't designed to lead armored thrusts deep into enemy territory. It couldn't maneuver in close combat like a turreted tank. But in a defensive role, dug into a good position with clear fields of fire and infantry support, the StuG III was one of the most lethal vehicles on the battlefield. American soldiers learned to fear them. Ed Shames, a paratrooper with the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, recalled encountering a StuG III in Normandy. His unit was advancing alongside American M5 light tanks when, quote, a couple of 75mm rounds went through the lead vehicle and into the tank directly behind it. The shots had been fired at point-blank range, and the lightly armored M5s didn't stand a chance. The third tank started backing out, and Shames ran for his life. The StuG had destroyed 2 tanks in seconds. Against Sherman tanks, the matchup was more balanced. A Sherman with the standard 75mm gun struggled to penetrate the StuG's frontal armor at combat ranges. But a Sherman with the 76mm high-velocity gun could reliably kill a StuG at 1,000 meters. The Sherman's turret gave it a massive advantage in close combat. It could acquire targets faster, maneuver more effectively. But American tankers learned quickly not to take StuGs lightly. Reports from U.S. commanders noted that StuG IIIs destroyed more American tanks than any other German vehicle, possibly even more than the feared 88mm anti-aircraft guns. American soldiers tended to blame the 88 for any tank loss, where they couldn't identify the source of fire. In reality, many of those kills came from well-hidden StuGs. After the war ended, the StuG III story didn't end. The Soviet Union captured hundreds of them. Some were refurbished and sent to Syria, where they fought Israeli forces during the Six-Day War in 1967. Yugoslavian partisans captured StuGs during and after the war and used them until the 1950s. Spain acquired a handful and kept them in service until 1954. Finland, as mentioned, operated theirs into the 1960s, but the real legacy of the StuG III isn't measured in how long it served or how many were built. It's measured in what it represents. The StuG III proves that wars aren't won by the fanciest equipment. They're won by the equipment that shows up, that works, that keeps fighting when everything else has broken down. Germany's armored forces in World War II are famous for their technological sophistication, the Tigers' thick armor, the Panthers' sloped glacis plate, the King Tiger's 88mm L-71 gun. These were engineering marvels, but they were also resource hogs, complicated, unreliable, expensive. For every Tiger in combat, there was probably another one in the repair depot with a broken transmission or engine trouble. For every Panther at the front, there were 2 more waiting for spare parts that would never arrive. The StuG III was the opposite. It was the vehicle Germany could actually afford to build, the vehicle crews could actually keep running, the vehicle that could actually be at the front lines when the shooting started. And in war, that matters more than anything else. By 1944, Germany was losing. No amount of StuGs could change that. The Allied bombing campaign was destroying German industry. Oil supplies were dwindling. Fuel shortages meant even operational vehicles couldn't move. Spare parts became impossible to find. But the StuG III kept fighting. When panzer divisions had no tanks left, they had StuGs. When infantry divisions needed armored support, they got StuGs. Until the very last days of the war, on April 22, 1945, Alkit's factory in Berlin was still producing them. Think about what that means. Berlin was surrounded. The Red Army was in the suburbs. The war was hours or days from ending. And Germany was still building StuG IIIs, not because they would win the war, that was impossible, but because the StuG III was the only thing left that could still slow the enemy down, the only thing that could still give German forces a fighting chance in their defensive positions. The StuG III carried the German war effort on its back in a way no other vehicle could match. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't featured in propaganda films like the Tiger. It didn't have the mystique of the Panther. But it was there, every day, every battle, grinding through the Eastern Front's frozen hell, holding the line in Italy, fighting house to house in German cities as the Reich collapsed. More enemy tanks destroyed than any other German vehicle, cheaper than any comparable platform, more reliable than anything else in the German arsenal, the highest operational availability rate in the Wehrmacht. These aren't opinions, these are facts, documented in German military records, Allied intelligence reports, and the kill tallies that both sides kept throughout the war. The StuG III wasn't Germany's most powerful armored vehicle. It wasn't the most advanced. It wasn't the one that makes collectors salivate or history enthusiasts argue about specifications late into the night. But when German commanders needed something that would actually show up to the battle, that would actually work when the shooting started, and that would actually kill enemy tanks before dying itself, they asked for StuGs. That's what made it Germany's MVP, not because it was the best, but because it was the one that delivered when it mattered most. In a war that killed 27 million Soviet citizens, destroyed countless cities, and consumed nations whole, the StuG III stands as a testament to a brutal truth. In war, effectiveness beats perfection every single time. The vehicles that win wars aren't always the ones we remember, but they're always the ones that showed up. Thank you for watching until the end. You can click in these other videos if you like this one. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video. Have a good day.